Have you ever wondered why a man finds himself inexplicably pulled toward a woman who moves through the world wrapped in shadows? She is not the luminous beacon of conventional femininity, but rather the dark mirror of his own unacknowledged depths, a silhouette carved from hidden memories and unspoken desires. In her silence, there is a language he scarcely understands yet cannot resist a dialect of longing and primal recognition. She embodies what he has repressed within himself, and in the gravity of her mystery, he confronts the contours of his own soul. She drifts across the edges of his awareness like an echo of a dream half remembered. Her laughter, soft and low, holds the weight of secrets he has never voiced. Observing her, he feels the tremor of an ancestral pull, as though she channels the collective shadow of generations of women who learned to bury their power beneath polite smiles. In her gaze, there is the promise of revelation, and he leans forward curious and unsettled, craving the truth she cannot fully offer, nor should she. In the quiet corridors of his mind, her silhouette awakens ancient archetypes. She is the Dark Mother, whose womb gave birth to both creation and destruction. She is the witch whose forbidden knowledge shatters illusions of safety. She is the wanderer who moves beyond societal confines into uncharted realms of self. Watching her, he glimpses the shadow of his own Anima, the feminine soul that dwells within every man, urging him toward wholeness. And as he observes her fearless descent into darkness, he is compelled to face the parts of himself he has locked away, his vulnerabilities, his longings, his rage. You know the sensation, the fluttering heartbeat, when she steps into view, the electric hush that follows her, like a veil. You feel your own defenses quivering, your carefully crafted persona losing its grip. She doesn't demand your admiration, she refuses it. Instead, she offers a silent challenge to meet her on equal terms, to gamble everything in the currency of authenticity. In her refusal to conform, she becomes the alchemical agent of his transformation, dissolving the base metal of his complacency into the gold of self-awareness. The interplay between them is a dance of light and shadow. He casts his gaze upon her, projecting fantasies of rescue and conquest, only to discover that she exists beyond his maps of desire. When he reaches out, he encounters emptiness and reflection, a void where his expectations evaporate. And in that void, he catches a glimpse of his own spectrum, the parts he calls weakness, the feelings he has shamed, the dreams he has abandoned. Every time he believes he understands her, she slips through his fingers, leaving behind the echo of a question. Who am I beneath the roles I play? She moves with the steady grace of someone who has courted her own darkness. She has embraced the parts of herself that society told her to hide: insecure laughter, unfiltered sorrow, fierce independence. In her shadow, she has found the wellspring of her power. As he watches, he senses that to truly be with her, he must turn inward, excavate his own depths, and face the spectres he has banished. This confrontation is no mere trial, it is an initiation. Only by reconciling with his own shadow can he enter the sanctuary of her authenticity. In this unfolding drama, stoic wisdom whispers through the corridors of his mind. He recalls Marcus Aurelius writing of obstacles as opportunities of fate's twists, as invitations to rise. He remembers Seneca's counsel to embrace hardship as the forge of character. Yet here, confronted by her fierce luminosity, he realizes that no philosophy can substitute for the courage of encounter. Philosophy guides him, but it is her embodied presence, the raw alchemy of her shadow, that propels him to act. He stands at the threshold of transformation, drawn by the gravity of her misshapen beauty. In her, he sees both his destruction and his salvation. She is the crucible in which his ego must be purified, the mirror that demands he acknowledge his most hidden sorrows. And as he steps closer, willing to dissolve his illusions, he becomes aware of something extraordinary: liberation. In the union of his light and shadow, he rediscovers his capacity for empathy, for vulnerability, for love unadorned by expectation. The shadowed feminine mystique is not a trap to be escaped, but a gateway to wholeness. Through her, he learns that true attraction is not possession, but reciprocity, a meeting of souls stripped of pretense. And though he may never fully grasp the depths of her mystery, in that unending question lies the promise of his own rebirth. She moves through his dreams like a half-forgotten melody, resonant and haunting. In the waking world, he catches himself tracing the contours of her absence, the scent of midnight jasmine that lingers on her skin, the half-smile she allows herself when no one watches. In those moments, he senses her dual nature, both fragile vessel and untamed force. He sees how her shadow shapes her light, how the wounds she bears have become the source of her resilience. And he realizes that the magnetism he feels is not born of beauty alone, but of the power she wields over her own darkness. In the theater of his psyche, she is both protagonist and director. He sits in the darkened audience, unaware that his own suppressed narratives are being unearthed by her gaze. As she steps into the spotlight, the curtains part on his hidden scripts, childhood echoes of abandonment, the sting of unacknowledged desire, the years spent masquerading as someone safe to love. She does not chastise him. She merely reflects back his story with unwavering clarity. And in that reflection, he sees the cracks in his foundation, the places where authenticity was chipped away in the service of approval. You may feel your breath catch when she draws near, a subtle reminder that vulnerability is the price of connection. She tests the limits of his emotional armor, probing gently until it dissolves. In that breach, shame seeps in, but it does not consume him. Instead, shame becomes a teacher guiding him toward compassion for himself and for her. Where once he might have recoiled at the prospect of raw emotion, he now leans in, willing to witness the depth of feeling that binds them. Her shadow becomes a lantern, illuminating the chamber of his heart he thought he'd sealed forever. Her silence speaks volumes. When she retreats into contemplation, she carries the weight of unseen battles fought in the corridors of her soul. He watches her from the periphery of day-to-day life, catching glimpses of her solitude, how she tilts her head as though listening to a melody only she can hear, how her eyes soften when she touches the spiral of a seashell or the frayed corner of a childhood photograph. In these private rituals, he senses her communion with the parts of herself that society taught her to fear, and he comes to understand that to know her is to honor her solitude without intrusion, to stand beside her rather than to fill the silence with platitudes. In their moments of convergence, words become unnecessary. Their connection pulses beneath the surface, an undercurrent of shared recognition. She moves into his space not to invite, but to challenge, to ask him whether he can bear the weight of her complexity. He responds not with declarations of conquest, but with quiet presence, an anchor of steadiness in the flux of emotion. Through this reciprocity, he learns a new form of intimacy, one that tolerates the jagged edges of their psyches without smoothing them over. He recalls Jung's words about the shadow. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In her, he witnesses the embodiment of that principle. She does not hide from her own ugly truths. She names them, embraces them, transmutes them into art, into wisdom. This fearless authenticity draws him into a vortex of self-examination. He examines his own patterns, the ways he wields humor as a shield, the habits he hides behind routine, the stories he repeats in search of redemption. In her reflection, he sees an opportunity to rewrite those narratives, to step out of the labyrinth of old wounds. You may find yourself wondering where desire ends and transformation begins. For him, the line dissolves in the heat of their connection. Desire becomes the spark that ignites intention. Longing becomes the compass that guides him toward his own soul's expansion. And as he moves deeper into this alchemical exchange, he understands that the shadowed feminine mystique is not a static quality, but a living force capable of both destruction and creation. She wields her power like a blade, carving away the false self, until the raw core stands revealed. In the crucible of their relationship, both are reforged. He learns to greet his own fears not as enemies to vanquish, but as allies offering buried treasures. She learns that her solitude need not be a fortress, but can be a sacred sanctuary shared with another who honors her autonomy. Their dynamic shifts from pursuit and evasion to collaboration and mutual revelation. Together, they traverse the landscapes of Psyche, mapping territories that neither could explore alone. This journey demands courage. It demands that he surrender the illusion of control, that she relinquish the myth of invulnerability. But within these acts of surrender, they discover a freedom more profound than any they have known, a freedom that arises when ego yields to soul, when light and shadow kiss at the horizon of consciousness. He begins to recognize the subtle shifts in his own perception. In her presence, reality refracts like light through a prism. Every emotion splits into a spectrum of meaning. Each glance she bestows becomes an invitation to go deeper, to question the solidity of the world he thought he knew. In the way she holds herself, no theatrics, just the raw honesty of a woman who has tasted her own darkness, he senses an intelligence beyond words. It is a knowing born of survival, of turning wounds into wisdom. In those rare moments when vulnerability intersects with trust, she might allow him a glimpse of her past, the friendships that dissolved when she refused to silence her opinions, the betrayals that taught her how easily love can become a weapon, the nights she wept in the hush of solitude, afraid that her own intensity would consume her. He listens without judgment, feeling the weight of each confession settle in his chest like sediment. And in responding with calm attention, rather than hurried reassurance, he learns that his greatest gift to her is presence, a steady flame flickering in the darkness of her doubts. You know what it feels like to be seen by someone who doesn't flinch at your edges. When she watches him, she doesn't recoil from his complexity. She leans in toward it, curious and unafraid. That curiosity becomes a mirror for him, reflecting facets of himself that he never paused to acknowledge. The child who believed emotions were dangerous, the young man who wore stoicism as armor, the adult who equated worth with productivity. Each of these versions of himself flickers across his mind's stage as she holds his gaze, and he finds himself yearning to integrate them, to bring them into the light, rather than banish them to the basement of his psyche. In this shared alchemy, they become co-creators of a new story. He offers reverence for her sovereignty. She offers respect for his journey. Together they learn that attraction is never a simple matter of physical chemistry or fleeting fantasy. It is the gravitational pull between two unconscious worlds reaching for union. The erotic charge between them is fueled by the infinite interplay of their inner landscapes, the tension of his desire to possess and her need for autonomy, the friction of his need for safety and her insistence on freedom. Stoic echoes whisper again, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. In his efforts to honor her, he realizes that true goodness is not a performance. It is the daily choice to meet himself and her with integrity. He does not become her savior. He becomes her companion, walking beside her on terrain that neither has fully mapped. And she in turn does not become his prize. She remains the keeper of her own story, inviting him to bear witness rather than applause. You might wonder if this dance ever finds resolution. Perhaps it does in moments of quiet communion, two souls lying beneath a canopy of stars, words unnecessary as they share the simple scent of rain on earth. Or perhaps resolution is a myth, for the miracle lies not in locking down certainty, but in embracing the ever-shifting mystery. In that acceptance, they discover freedom, not the kind measured by possessions or promises, but the kind that arises when two people meet without masks. He learns to honor the silences between her sentences, to recognize each pause as an opening rather than a void to be filled. She learns to lean into his steadiness, to trust that vulnerability need not spell danger. In this delicate exchange, they cultivate a language of feeling more precise than any vocabulary, A touch becomes a confession, a glance, a vow, a sigh, a sacred pact. In their erotic tension, there is both surrender and power, a paradox she embodies and he adores. As their bond deepens, the world around them seems to realign. He notices how the mundane gains texture, the way sunlight slants through a curtain, the taste of coffee that warms his throat, the hush of a library aisle where knowledge sleeps in dusty volumes. These small details become portals into presence, a lesson she imparts without preaching. She simply lives in each moment, unafraid of its texture, unwilling to rush through it. And he, once a visitor in the temple of now, learns to linger. In her shadowed feminine mystique, he discovers not only the map to her soul, but the chart of his own. She teaches him that love is not a place of safety, but a crucible of transformation. It demands that he surrender control, that he trust the currents of feeling, even when they pull him into unknown depths. But within that surrender, he finds his greatest strength. He becomes the man who can stand unshaken by uncertainty, who finds adventure in the unspoken, who delights in the riddles she weaves with a single look. And though their journey remains unfinished, each step taken together dissolves the boundary between self and other. In the glow of her shadowed mystery, he shines transfigured by the alchemy of attraction, shadow, and love. He begins to notice how her presence reshapes time itself. Moments with her stretch into eternity, each second infused with a gravity that tugs at his awareness. When she brushes her hand against his arm, it is as if she transfers a pulse of her inner world, an invitation to feel the tremor of her history, her triumphs, her scars. In that contact, he perceives the subtle language of the body, the way her spine straightens, not in arrogance, but in self-possession, the way her throat softens when she speaks her truths, no matter how sharp they may sound. He learns that her power is not wielded like a weapon, but held like a conductor's baton, guiding the symphony of her own being. In her reflection, he confronts his old scripts one last time, the parts of himself that clung to safety, seeking approval, avoiding risk, curating an image rattle like chains ready to break. He feels the lure of complacency, the whisper of this is enough, but he hears her silent insistence on more feeling, more daring, more radical honesty. You may recognize that pull in your own life, the comfort of the known, battling the thrill of transformation. She embodies the latter, and by witnessing her resolve, he taps into reserves of courage he did not know he possessed. In private moments, she might share a poem she wrote in the small hours, the words bleeding onto the page like runes of personal myth. He reads them reverently, aware that they map the landscapes of her inner exile and her reclamation. Through her writing, he glimpses the ritual of her shadow work, the naming of her fears, the celebration of her rage, the tender mourning of losses that shaped her. And as he reads, he feels his own defenses, melting tears well on his eyelids for reasons he cannot fully name. This is not pity, it is communion. You too have felt the tremor of witnessing another's authenticity. It destabilizes you and inspires you at once. You sense how her willingness to dwell in darkness illuminates your own hidden chambers. With each confession she trusts him with, he cultivates an inner sanctuary where all parts light and dark are welcomed. In this sanctuary, he learns that compassion begins with self-inquiry, that kindness toward others blossoms from kindness toward oneself. She holds this truth not as doctrine, but as lived experience, and in watching her, he learns to practice it. Their intimacy transforms from passionate conflagration to steady flame. There are nights when they talk until dawn about nothing and everything. The nature of fate, the ache of purpose, the echoes of their ancestral pasts. She quotes Epictetus on the dignity of adversity. He offers lines from Rumi about love as the bridge between souls. In the overlap of their voices, a new harmony emerges, an unspoken vow to keep probing the boundaries of their comfort zones. And when words fail, they invent new ways to communicate, a shared ritual of lighting a single candle, of tracing constellations on each other's skin, of dancing barefoot in rain-soaked grass. He begins to discover the poetry in imperfection. Where once he idealized order, he now delights in the knotted grain of a weathered board, the way sunlight fractures through cracked glass, the pattern of veins on a fallen leaf. These imperfections echo her own narrative, wounded, mended, radiant with resilience. In loving her, he learns to cherish his own flawed edges, to stop sanding them smooth for the sake of acceptance. His life acquires a new texture, one woven from the threads of vulnerability and courage. You might wonder how this transformation sustains itself beyond the glow of romance. The answer lies in practice. They commit to rituals that honor both freedom and fidelity, walking separate paths at dawn to greet their individual shadows, then rejoining at midday to exchange what they have discovered. She challenges him to journal his dreams. He invites her to share hers. Through these mirrorings, they maintain their sovereignty while deepening their bond. It is a dance of distance and closeness, each step reinforcing the other's autonomy and unity. In the crucible of their shared journey, he realizes that attraction is not a static magnetism, but a living organism, ever shifting, ever demanding attention. It thrives when fed by mutual respect for the shadow and the light. She does not cower from his darkness. She meets him there with lantern in hand. He does not shy from her intensity. He receives it with open heart. Together, they cultivate a love that is neither tame nor wild, but exquisitely balanced at the threshold of the unknown. As twilight falls on their unfolding story, he feels a quiet triumph, not of conquest, but of emergence. The man who once sought to possess now knows that choosing is an act of empowerment. The woman who once bore her shadow in solitude now carries it alongside another who reveres it. Their love becomes a testament to the power of shadowed feminine mystique to awaken transformation in both souls. In the ebb and flow of their shared existence, he discovers that her shadowed presence is not an encroachment, but an invitation to expand his capacity for wonder, for pain, for love beyond the narrow corridors of safety. He feels it in the way her absence echoes like an afterimage, a soft ache that stirs in him his own longing to dwell in mystery rather than shrink from it. It is here at the boundary between knowing and unknowing that their deepest alchemy takes place. She teaches him that individuation is not a solo pilgrimage, but a dance with another who mirrors the self's hidden facets. He watches her bring her dark thoughts into the chiaroscuro of daylight, giving voice to sorrow and rage with equal reverence. When she speaks of the rage, her tone is quiet but contained, as though she holds a storm in cupped hands. He hears the thunder in her whisper and understands that her anger is not a flaw, but a clarion call to reclaim her power. In witnessing her embrace this tempest, he learns to welcome the storm within himself, no longer as a threat to be stilled, but as a force that, when channeled, can reshape the landscape of his life. You might think that such intensity risks burning everything to ash, but in their case it becomes the crucible for a profound rebirth. Together, they learn to temper the fire with water, softening the heat with compassion, the burn with gentleness. He offers her an oasis of calm when her emotional terrain becomes volcanic. She offers him a fierce ember of passion when his spirit cools into complacency. Through their interplay, they embody the union of opposites: fire, tempered by water autonomy, balanced with intimacy, shadow illuminated by light. In the quiet aftermath of their most turbulent encounters, he senses the contours of a new self emerging. His heart, once sealed against vulnerability, now beats with an openness he never dreamed possible. He finds himself pausing at dawn to watch the sky transform, savoring the question of what daybreak might reveal, rather than rushing toward tasks that numb him. His mind, once a fortress against feeling, now welcomes the intrusion of his own questions. What do I yearn for? What have I denied? What if my whole life could become a canvas for authenticity? She discerns the shift in him with a knowing smile. She sees how he no longer flinches at her intensity, but leans into it, offering not control, but solidarity. When he places his hand on the small of her back, the gesture is not possessive, but protective, a silent vow to honor her sovereignty, even as he honors his own. In this moment, they stand at the confluence of two rivers, each feeding the other's flow, each enriched by the depths they share. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. In their relationship, he tastes that privilege as a fundamental right rather than a distant ideal. He witnesses how her refusal to light herself on fire to please others becomes fuel for his own self-immolation of old self-defeating habits. He notices how in her presence the old scripts of not enough or too much erode into the realization there is no such thing as too much authenticity. You have likely encountered women who seem immune to the gravitational pull of others' expectations. They move through life with a lucidity that borders on defiance. They know their worth without shouting it, and when they whisper their truths, the world listens. She is such a woman, and he, once a wary traveler, now follows her into the uncharted. With each step, he sheds the brittle shells of his persona, the dutiful son, the efficient professional, the stoic friend. In their place grows a man who can claim his full spectrum, the laughter and the tears, the confidence and the doubt, the joy and the grief. Their relationship becomes a living testament to the power of shadow work. It is not a one-time purge of darkness, but an ongoing conversation with their underworld selves. At times they delve into the cavernous depths together, recalling childhood wounds, unpacking ancestral traumas, confronting cultural myths that bind them. At other times they convene at the summit of their emerging light, celebrating small victories, honoring each other's resilience, and recommitting to the path of growth. He marvels that the magnetism he once mistook for possession was only a shadow of what true attraction can be, a co-creative force that demands total presence. She marvels that the longing she once felt to escape solitude has been transformed into a longing to share her solitude with someone who reveres it. In the space between their hearts, they craft a new story, one where love is not a rescue mission, but a mutual initiation into wholeness. As the sun dips below the horizon of their shared chapters, he feels the whisper of something extraordinary. This connection can endure beyond the romantic haze because it is rooted in the bedrock of their souls. The woman who knows her worth does not merely attract, she awakens. And he, having been awakened, walks forward, not as a man in pursuit, but as a companion on the path of awakened living. In the quiet moments after laughter fades, he feels her influence reverberate through his bones. She has taught him that vulnerability is not a weakness to be hidden, but a bridge to deeper connection. He recalls a time when he shied away from tears, fearing they would diminish his strength. Now, when emotion wells up, whether in sorrow or in joy, he allows it to flow, trusting that it will refine him rather than rupture him. In witnessing her fearless immersion in feeling, he discovered that authenticity is the currency of true intimacy. Her shadowed feminine mystique continues to reframe his understanding of attraction. No longer is it a simple spark ignited by looks or charm. It is a sacred contract between unconscious worlds. He notices how ordinary gestures become charged with meaning, the way she tucks a stray lock of hair behind her ear, not for attention, but as an unconscious assertion of self-possession, the way she lingers by a rain-drenched window, not for drama, but to drink in the poetry of falling water. In these small acts, he discerns her ritual of self-honoring, and he finds himself wanting to mirror it, honoring his own needs, his own rhythms, his own quiet rituals of self-care. Together they cultivate a shared language woven from metaphor and myth. She speaks of her inner forest, where ancient trees of pain have been transmuted into pillars of strength. He speaks of his inner ocean, where storms once battered him, but now carve away what is no longer needed. As they exchange these visions, their stories intertwine, creating a tapestry richer than either could weave alone. In the interplay of her forest and his ocean, They discover a landscape vast enough to hold both their histories and their aspirations. You may wonder whether such profound transformation can coexist with daily life's demands. They discover that it must for true change is not an escape from reality, but an alchemy of life's mundane and mystical currents. She continues her work meetings, deadlines, obligations, infused with a grounded stillness that radiates from her core. He continues his routines, family dinners, friendships, errands infused with a newfound curiosity for what lies beneath each interaction. Their love does not withdraw them from the world, it deepens their engagement with it. The tension between freedom and fusion remains a living dynamic. At times he craves the spaciousness of solitude, retreating into his study to write, to reflect, to dream. At times she craves the warmth of companionship, inviting him to join her in impromptu kitchen dance sessions or moonlit city walks. They honor each other's needs without guilt or coercion, recognizing that healthy attachment is elastic rather than rigid. In this balance, they discover the paradox of connection, closeness, fortified by distance, unity, enriched by autonomy. Stoic echoes linger in his mind, but they now share space with her poetic refrains. He recalls Epictetus's instruction to make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. In her presence, he learns to distinguish between what he can shape, his reactions, his attention, his values, and what he must release, her past, her fears, her mysteries. And she, having learned to face her own darkness, now learns to welcome the unpredictability of his growth, trusting that he too will navigate the undercurrents of his psyche with integrity. In intimate moments, they explore the alchemy of shadow integration through creative expression. She channels her emotions into charcoal sketches, raw, jagged strokes that bear witness to her internal tempest. He channels his into journal pages, mapping his insights onto paper like constellations. Then they share their creations, each seeing the other's interior landscape made visible. In this exchange, they realize that art becomes a vessel for the unsayable, a bridge between psyches that bypasses the limitations of language. You have likely sensed the thrill of bearing witness to another's inner world. It is both a gift and a responsibility, for to see another so fully is to hold them in a crucible of trust. He offers her that trust without reservation. He does not shy from her pain, nor does he fix it. Instead, he holds space, allowing her to move through each emotion with dignity. She in turn offers him the mirror of her acceptance, reflecting back his worth, even when he doubts it. Their bond deepens not through grand declarations, but through consistent acts of presence. She texts him at dawn with a poem excerpt. He replies with a promise to light a candle in her honor that evening. They send each other dream fragments over breakfast. They carve out an hour at dusk to meditate together on separate pillows. These tiny rituals anchor their expansive transformation in the soil of everyday life. In the final reckoning of their journey, he recognizes that the magnetism she wields is not a weapon to conquer, but a gift to receive. Her shadowed feminine mystique is an ongoing invitation to meet himself over and over at ever-deepening levels. And in his willingness to answer that invitation, he becomes not the hero of her story, but the companion of his own. In the hushed dawn after their most profound night, he awakens with a sense of spaciousness he has never known. The heavy weight of his old anxieties has lifted, replaced by a buoyancy of spirit that carries him through the morning light. He moves through his rituals, brushing his teeth, steeping coffee, reading a few lines of Marcus Aurelius, with a new quietude, as though each task has been washed clean by the alchemy they have shared. He realizes that her shadowed mystique has tempered his restlessness, teaching him that stillness can be as fierce a power as action. She greets the day wrapped in a shawl of innocence, and knowing her eyes reflecting the pale gold of sunrise. In her soft exhale, he hears the echo of ancient wisdom that every ending is but a threshold to new beginnings. She does not speak of what they have traversed. Instead, she offers him a look that contains both gratitude and resolve. In that gaze, he feels honored, as though he has been entrusted with a fragment of her soul's core. And in that moment, He understands that their bond is beyond fleeting passion. It is a covenant forged in the fires of shadow and tempered in the waters of vulnerability. You may wonder how love survives when the initial spark dims. Here love is not a spark, but a steady flame tended each day by choice. He remembers the nights he spent chasing fleeting highs, believing that intensity alone equated to depth. Now he cherishes the quiet rituals, the shared silence over morning tea, the brush of her elbow as they walk through a sunlit park, the softness of her laughter when he reads a line that moves her. Each gesture is a reaffirmation of their journey, a vow renewed not in grand proclamations, but in humble presence. In the fullness of their union, he no longer feels fragmented. His past regrets failed, relationships self-imposed limitations. The years lost to fear have become threads in the tapestry of his becoming. She taught him that wounds are not stains on the soul, but entry points for light. By embracing her own history of pain, she illuminated his own, and together they transformed anguish into art, trauma into testament. He now carries his story without shame, aware that vulnerability is the true hallmark of strength. Her influence extends beyond their private world into his relationships with others. He finds himself listening more deeply to friends, offering empathy instead of quick fixes, honoring their shadows rather than dismissing them. He speaks with authenticity at work, asking for support when needed, setting boundaries with clarity. In each arena of his life, the lessons she imparted ripple outward, transforming not only his inner landscape, but the world he touches. She too is changed. The solitary woman who once believed independence meant isolation now understands that real freedom lies in shared sovereignty. She no longer bears her mystique as armor, but wields it as a beacon, an invitation to those who respect her dual power of light and darkness. In his presence, she has discovered a sanctuary where her depths can be explored without fear of drowning. And in granting him that sanctuary, she has taught him the highest form of love, the love that honors another's autonomy, even as it celebrates union. Their story has not ended in perfect harmony, for perfection is an illusion. Instead, it has arrived at a microcosm of balance, a living paradox where freedom and intimacy coexist. In this space, he and she can grow without outgrowing each other, explore without escaping one another, and love without pretension or hunger for control. It is a rare alchemy, born of courage and curiosity, sustained by daily acts of presence. Now, standing together on the threshold of what comes next, they share a silent understanding. The journey of shadow and light is eternal. They will continue to mirror each other's depths, challenge each other's complacency, and celebrate each other's emergence into ever greater authenticity. They know that as long as they honor their shadows, their light will never fade. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.